I'm really curious to see what continues to unfold with psychedelics and with transpersonal counseling and psychology and see. I'm curious to see how that unfolds. The thing that came into my mind when you were explaining the no, this is a drug and this will, you know, put holes in your brain. The question that is always imperative to ask is who is telling you that information and how is it serving them? And this is what we talked about before with the mental health industrial complex. And it's sort of the same thing with decolonizing yourself. Who is telling you that information and how is it serving them?
Yeah.
And how can you think critically and decide for yourself what is good for you?
Yeah. The Always Be podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Always Be podcast, where we talk about everything transpersonal. Last week, our topic was psychedelics, and we had so much to say that we decided to turn this into a two-part episode. So this will be part two. Should we do a little vibe check?
Oh, a vibe check. Yeah. I wasn't expecting it, so now I'm checking my vibe. I feel really, really good today. I feel I know it is like that. It really does. I did some healing and I feel kind of a sweet, like kind of detached, but in a good way. Like not attached to the outcomes. I'm really more enjoying the process. And especially with this podcast, I'm feeling so much more just enjoying the creative process of flowing through my life at this moment.
I love that. I'm gonna piggyback off that, actually. I'm gonna circle back and piggyback.
Can I just name something?
I'm
Something
just gonna
coming
name. Yeah, my vibe. I actually am kind of in a similar vibe space, but there's like a little bit of I have a little bit of nervousness because today I put out into the world an offering of free counseling. And this morning before I put it out, I had to do kind of a meditation of like non-attachment. Like I'm putting this out so that anybody who sees it and is seeking this can find that. And this is a selfless act. And this isn't about me gaining validation. This isn't about me taking ownership of this like free thing I'm offering, you know. So I was like, had to have kind of this moment with Source and just say, I'm just offering this selflessly, and whatever comes to me is what I will work with. But there is still always this like sort of nervous or like rawness of putting myself out there. So it's like a little bit of non-attachment. You know, I'm leaning into the non-attachment, but I've got some nervousness on the other side of that too.
Yeah. I want to just tell you live here on this recording that I watched the video that you posted about your offering and I thought it was so well spoken. Like every single, you just were so, it was like bam, bam, bam. You described your practice, you described who you offer, you described what you were doing. And it was, I was actually having, I wouldn't, you know, I love you. So I probably would be giving you this feedback anyway, but I feel like it wasn't just my love for you that was making me really like impressed with the way that you spoke about your offering.
Thank you for saying that.
That's genuinely. I was like, ooh, I want to just copy these words down and say them myself because it felt like it encompassed everything that we've been trying to label for months. And yeah, so I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It took many tries, I will say, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The first recording was 15 minutes long. And then I tried to edit it down, and there was no editing it to shorter. So then I did my next step 2, and my friend Natalie helped me immensely in making a Google form and figuring out my bio. And she was like, it's too long. It's got to be shorter. It's too long. It's got to be shorter. So she was really helpful in that. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, you landed at a really great place.
Thanks.
Okay, so I will just say that I think the next thing we will do is we will play the conclusion of the first conversation that we had around psychedelics, which ended up sort of expanding as all of our conversations do to cover other realms. So if we feel good with this intro, what I'll say is the next thing that you will hear is the conclusion of the first conversation that we had, which ended up getting cut off. And because Brenna had technical issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are now, and then we will follow that up with a conversation that we're going to have now, just to sort of circle back to anything that we didn't cover in regards to psychedelics and to wrap that this whole 2-episode arc up in a nice little bow.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, I will say this. The
Yeah.
panel that I went to the other day, the thing that stuck with me the most was your privilege is equal to the amount of effort you must exert in, let's say, liberation or social justice or
Mm-hmm.
decolonizing. So if you have a highly privileged identity, that means we require more exertion of your effort in this matter. If you have a less privileged identity, you get to give less. And that's not how it's existing right now. It's the opposite. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
this process of
Yeah.
like reciprocity, really.
I love that word, reciprocity. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And like I'm here for it for sure. That feels so right. And I think that's something that I've been feeling is how I'll like I have to dismantle my own value of my credentials. And I want to make sure that I'm like I would love to be able because the thing that's hard if you don't have credentials, you can't work in the way that we as a counselor in this
Mm-hmm.
society. And I would
Mm-hmm.
love to provide I'd love for ABC eventually, like wherever however we build it up with all these, just to interface with a lot more people who can offer counseling and healing. Give them a space to do it and just community validation of their skills and not this systemic validation of their skills. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what's so challenging is it's like basically like I remember it's like I think there's a lot of perpetuation of the system because it's like, oh, I went through that, so you have to go through it. I'm like, I would love for no one to ever have to get a master's degree ever again. I'm so grateful for the things I learned. Part of the reason I feel like I went to Naropa was so that we could meet each other. And
Yeah.
the entire time I was in the program, the whole time, I feel like there was a section of people that understood that they were there for the process.
Yeah.
And we were a lot more comfortable. We were like, all of the hangups are just part of learning how to be in a relationship with these challenges. And then there was like some people in our cohort, like I love much love, who were very focused on getting the degree and the credentials, and they were struggling because Naropa is not very good at that. And
No.
so for me, the whole time I was like, this is just the practice. This is the practice. And there was that I got to, so much wisdom that I got to buy access to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will,
Yeah. And I will say, I think that
it's truth.
how I feel about Naropa is that it makes really quality human beings. If you go there
Yeah.
because you want to be a really good therapist and you're not dedicated to being a really good person, you're going to have a hard time because their goal is not to have you graduate being the best therapist. It's to have you graduate causing the least amount of harm from that point on because you have used yourself as the example, used yourself as the client, analyzed your own work and healing. Like that was basically 3 years of master's level personal therapy for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. And I think
That's
that
what
that's
I
why I think that's what it's supposed to be. I look at some of the people, like some of the, yeah, we just had a meeting. There's just some of the people who are in other programs, like they're becoming therapists, and I just get a little worried. I'm like,
hmm
oh my God.
More than a
Like,
little,
are you seeing a therapist
more than a
yourself?
little.
Concerned? Like, just they're so sad. Like, I'm like, sweetie, like, do you need a hug?
Probably.
Yeah, that sounded really condescending, but yeah, I do get concerned because not a lot of programs emphasize personal work, which means that therapists are just
Right.
holding all of their things just in there with their space, which is why I think that there's a lot of, yeah. So
Here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say. I'm having this like, I think it's just a little bit of an existential crisis, to be honest. But it's like even the word healing, I'm having a reaction to because it's like I get not pathologizing, right? And I get not treating. And I'm like, I do think healing is important, but it's also like, why isn't it fine to be messy? Why can't we express? Why can't we struggle? Why are we always reaching this place of betterment and perfectionism? And it's like, why do we need to heal? Like, it's a healing. I mean, obviously, we need to dismantle the system that is
yeah.
causing all of these problems, that is like creating severe harm everywhere in all energetic spaces, right? But
Mhm.
even focusing so much on healing, I'm having a reaction to it recently
Yeah.
where I'm just like, for who and for why? What are you healing for? And what's your
Yeah.
definition of healing mean? And who is it serving? And if it's not you, and if it's not the betterment of the collective, and if it's not our energetic heart space, then it's a fucking problem. If you're just trying to stress reduction so you can be better at your job, I mean, I get it. I get it. It sucks to have a job that takes away elements of your ability to be a human and express as a human. You aren't allowed to grieve. You aren't allowed to stress. You aren't allowed to be messy. You have to follow these rules and you have to work these hours and you can only get these days off and you have to be here to serve because that's super important.
Hmm.
Marketing, marketing is so important. Marketing is so important that you have to strip your fucking humanity away. And what does HR do? Nothing. So you're just gonna grind and you're gonna meditate and you're gonna fucking do yoga and it's like, but you're trying to heal, but I
No,
just want
Avery, I think this is,
I just want
dude, this is the deal. Liberation is the only work.
I
I'm a
know.
100% for you in getting rid of the word healing because all that we
Yeah,
have that like liberation is the thing. Liberation is non-attachment. Non-attachment and liberation are all these. It's just enlightenment, baby. It's just enlightenment. That's all there is. And
yeah.
I know that's a hard word to say because everyone there's this whole like enlightenment does not mean like perpetual orgasm. I just like we can have a whole enlightenment episode if we need to have it. But like the liberation, that's the deal. You're getting your
Yeah.
limits out of the way. I think you're right. This is like that force of chaos thing that I was saying. That was sort of my mantra a couple
Hmm.
weeks ago. Where I was like, be a force of chaos. For real. Be a force of chaos.
Yeah.
I think it's
Uh,
balanced because like we're not like there's a space where it's
It
like
is balance.
you don't just get to go causing harm. This is what the guy. So I'm just gonna say everybody should go find this guy. His name is Jack. His Twitter, not Twitter, TikTok handle is Watch Full Coyote, and he's from Maine. So my friend Liv showed this person to me, and he's amazing. But he talks. What were we just talking about? Oh, yes, exactly. He talked about the different dynamics that are needed for liberation. And he was talking about how it is important to do the internal work of making sure that you're not just leaving your trauma everywhere you go. We need to all be holding our
Hmm.
own stuff and taking accountability and responsibility. That's a big part. And
Hmm.
I think that the entire mental health model is based around that, and a lot of this new age like healing circle space is based around that same thing where it's like I'm sitting here. I just was in this women's circle I was telling Avery, and it was just all these women talking about their own work on their own self, and I just remember being like, we're all good. We need to start looking at other things. Like everyone in this circle is except for maybe one or two people are totally have a hold of their own stuff enough to start to enact change outside of ourselves. And there's only so much you can do inside. And it's
Yeah.
not healing. You're right. Because we aren't broken.
Right. But I mean, I think there's here's the other like devil's advocate part of my brain that's like there are wounds, there are wounds, there are wounds that we have received from other people taking our power away from us and inflicting pain we didn't
Yeah.
deserve. And that needs healing, like you said, right? That needs to change.
Yeah.
You can't go around acting out from that place.
Yeah.
So there is an element of we need to heal the wounds. It's like true healing of the wounds. I think what's annoying and frustrating is healing has been co opted into productivity and it's not actually healing, it's just treating. And I'm like,
And
it's,
yeah. And I
it's
think,
liberation.
well, this is what, yeah, liberation, I think, is just a huge word because it covers so much. And then also, yeah, I think I was saying this the other day to someone where I was like talking about a lot of this healing stuff is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. We're like, oh, like what? How can I feel less stressed at my corporate job? And it's like, uh, you're not like this isn't like maybe you should just acknowledge the stress. Like I almost think about how long I spent in this relationship making myself happy instead of recognizing how abusive the person I was with was. That's
Hmm.
on me.
You're treating. You were treating,
Yeah,
treating,
I
treating.
was just
Cope.
part of me is almost like I'm so good at making myself happy that I was able to stay there for as long as I did.
Hmm.
That's probably problematic to talk about.
Well, I think it's problematic in itself, but it's also you're just a product of how you've been conditioned, which is to cope and to treat and to mask. So, you know, it's great that you can make yourself happy, but there is an element of at what cost? It's kind of like
Yeah,
the spiritual bypassing
yeah,
thing where it's
blinding
like
myself to the
just
reality.
right.
Yeah, I mean, and how different is that from ignoring injustice on a global scale? This is just getting really, really deep.
Well,
We could talk about
okay.
this forever.
It is, but also now I'm going to say it because I have to say it. But when you are a victim of abuse, there is a limit to how much accountability you are allowed to take. And I will always say that because when you are
Yeah.
being abused by an abuser and they are manipulative and they are controlling and they fuck with your psyche, there is a limit to
Yeah.
how much control you have over your freedom. And that is the same thing that's happening now. Physical
Yeah.
abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse is the same thing that we are watching in Palestine. That is genocide. They are not similar, they are the same. And when you, so, liberation, it's like liberation has its limits
Yeah.
when you are being
Yeah.
controlled.
I need Avery in my life to support me through this whole recovering from abuse situation. Yeah, it's just it's just so nuanced to have in my body that experience of being hurt so deeply and then also hold so much privilege as an individual. It's just such a deep, there's just I don't know. I want to take accountability, and also my taking of accountability was a big it was, well, there's like accountability, there's almost like we need two words for it, because there's accountability for things we've done wrong, and then there's what happens in abuse, where it's like I'm taking responsibility for everything that is going wrong, and I'm believing that it's my fault and it's my responsibility to manage it. And accountability, and so maybe
It's not.
like it's not. This has just made me really emotional. Are we allowed to cry on this
Yeah, because
podcast? Yeah.
of course we are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it also is
It's
like,
just,
I think it's good to share because the reason I can be so helpful to you is because I've been you and I'm a little further down the timeline
yeah.
of healing, I'll say it, healing my own experience of abuse. And this is why we
Yeah.
do this because you don't know who's going to come to you in 3 years, but you're going to be prepared. And I didn't know that I was going to have to be prepared for not just you, but other people in my life. But now I know why I went through that. And now I know why I healed. And that's the whole fucking point of all of this. That's the whole fucking point of all of this.
Oh, my heart.
Literally, the whole point.
I've been like Avery knows, but like basically my two closest people are all, we're all just like, we've all just have this experience in common. And I just feel like, oh, like just so, yeah, it's just such an intense, yeah, I feel so grateful for Avery. Anyway, people, everyone can know Avery. I talked to Avery before I left, and she was like, be selfish. And I needed to hear that. And that was like one of the things that actually got me to leave. So I love you, buddy.
I love you too. So before we got cut off, we were talking a little bit about the difference between accountability and responsibility. We were sharing a little bit of our own lived experiences being in abusive relationships and sort of what role we play for one another through the healing process. And before that, we were talking a little bit about the education that we received and how to hold that and our privileged identities in this conversation about colonizing, I guess, healing and wellness spaces,
Yeah.
and psychedelics in particular.
Yeah. I think we ended up there because of the way we talked about how psychedelics are being colonized and other things have been colonized, like mindfulness and yoga. And then essentially a lot of the things that form the basis of the mindfulness based transpersonal counseling program.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right. You were just saying, I just listened to the stuff last night about how you kept asking and they would just give you another question to think about.
Yeah.
Very
Going to
Naropa.
a contemplative school. But I don't want it to seem as though I'm not really grateful. I am super grateful for the experience that I had. I actually love the school. I can, hold critique of how there's space for it to improve as an institution and still have an immense amount of gratitude for the people there and the teachers that we've met and the things that we were exposed to in our education. It was amazing. I think for me, it's just how to hold particularly a white privileged identity going into a wellness space with this particular lens that a lot of what I have learned has come from indigenous communities or even Zen Buddhism, Eastern ideologies. So for me, it's just, yeah, how do I stay on this path that feels like it's the right path for me without, I don't know, taking up too much space?
Yeah, I'm glad. I think that we will just continue to ask the question, and the answer will just be dependent on the situation.
Yeah. There was something you said earlier about examining our identities and asking the question of like, are we just trying to,
Oh yeah.
is this virtue signaling? Do you
I
want to
said, are we
share
just
what your thought is?
I just said, are we just two white girls virtue signaling that we're making decisions for BIPOC individuals and we're just really just doing all of our things selfishly and like saying the mental health care system is unfair, but really we just don't want to have to deal with insurance and taking notes?
Mm,
The answer is maybe.
yeah. But this is what it looks like to be evaluating your privilege and questioning what your thoughts are. Are we
Yeah.
just are we saying are we using the excuse that we think the current mental health care system is not designed to help marginalized people and it's designed from an oppressive place? Are we using that truth as an excuse for us just not wanting to go and be a part of it? Or are there other valid reasons why we don't want to be a part of it? I don't know. Maybe both. Probably
Maybe both.
both.
Probably both. Well, I was saying in the mental health episode, I did say, which is something I do think is true, is that I think all decisions are made intuitively, and then we come up with the justifications afterwards. So sometimes, so I think that we can look from the point of view where we're at. The thing is that when you make a decision, it puts you in a position where you can, like, you're depending on where you are in relationships to something, it impacts how you see it. So because we have decided not to get licensed, we don't have any any investment in that system, which I think means that we can look at it in a certain light. And
Mm-hmm.
the things that we find fault with just confirm what we felt was our intuitive choice. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think everything needs to be removed from itself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and do you believe in intuition, or am I just making it up? Just is that just my privilege want to not have to jump through the hurdles that other people are jumping through in attempt to be kind healers? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good way of phrasing it. I will say from my perspective, it was very my intuitive hit was this is not what you're meant to do. And a good friend of mine gave me advice a while ago that has been so helpful for me. And it's so simple, but she was like, it'll become clear.
Yeah.
It'll become clear. It's not clear right now, but it'll become clear. And that's how I feel with acting on intuition. It'll become clear why this is so important to you. And it has. It has unfolded for us in many different ways.
Yeah. This is why it's like you just end up, or I just end up, we just end up in a constant state of questions and questions. And I think that landing in, I'll land in a firm place and I'll think, yeah, and then something will disrupt it. That's just the way. And so that was my thought of listening to the other episodes. But
Yeah.
all of the things that I said in those episodes also felt true.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you were talking about Naropa, though, we had talked about um, circling back to the psychedelic conversation, just covering anything that we felt like we didn't cover. And one of the experiences we had in common was this transpersonal counseling class where we had a professor who was very involved in psychedelics and also was carrying a lot of the conversation about ethics, ethical use, and ethical choices in regards to how we as a culture appropriate these medicines. So it had a big impact on both of us, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to talk about the thing that really took away from it.
Yeah, so our professor, Dr. Angela Beers is her name. She's awesome. You can go look her up and see the work that she's been doing with MAPS. MAPS stands for,
The Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. Oh, multidisciplinary acad? No, it's association. Yeah, I think.
do you want to give a little brief explanation of what that means?
Um, can I be honest with you? I don't know a ton about maps because I've never really been involved with them. Here's how I see them. It's essentially the big kahuna in America. There's got to be other branches, but I do believe it was formed in this country. Um, it's a collection, they call it multidisciplinary, but it's a collection of people who are learning about psychedelic studies, and they have the right now they have the training on MDMA. They either have a copyright or some type of proprietary agreement around MDMA studies, but they're also just sort of the people who do studies and produce papers and sort of are driving and guiding a lot of the conversations around psychedelics, and they have been for a while. It's
Yeah.
started at least like probably 50 years old as an institution. I think
Yeah.
um, Rick Doblin is the main dude now at MAPS,
That's
and
how I understand it. So they're sort of the organizing institution for the main amount of research that is happening in how psychedelics can be used with psychology and for healing,
Mhm.
for treatment. Um, and they lobby, right? They're kind of lobbying for certain bills to be passed for legalization or decrim of certain substances.
I can't speak on that actually. I have no idea, and I'm just not even going to make a statement. I'm not sure their involvement in politics.
Okay, well, then that's just a guess that I have
Yeah.
that could totally just not be accurate. Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. I do know their thing with MDMA. They did have to get it. I think it's some sort of federal approval. I mean, they are working on some level with some government
Yeah.
impact around regulation. I'm not unsure if it's a if it seems as if it's a little map centric. My experience of maps is that they're very it's like a cool kids club, and I'm an anti-establishmentarian at heart, so I'm like, get away from me. I don't want
So
to be
what do
part
you
of your.
know about Angela Beer's involvement with maps?
Oh, all I know is I just watched her protest. I don't know her previous engagement if she ever used to be on with them on their team. I know that she talked about wanting them to include more indigenous perspectives on their panels and feeling as if the general maps um maps is it follows the medical model
Hmm.
more than anything else. It's following, it's adhering to that sort of clinical administration of psychedelics for the purpose of treating mental illness in
Yeah.
individuals. It operates on that sort of clinical frame.
Hmm. And we've talked about this before, how the medical model takes away from the cultural relationship that indigenous communities have to medicine and plant medicine and ceremony. And I think her sort of opinion is to support, like you said, more indigenous people being on the panel, but also to be protecting indigenous rights to plant medicine and to the sacredness of what that means if these substances are going to further be used in the Western medical framework.
Yeah. And like my understanding is, I know a point of contention for a lot of folks is the mescaline producing cactuses that are used for the peyote ceremonies. I've never been involved in one, but they are, I think, endangered. There
Mm-hmm.
is a big fear that the um, popularization of this medicine will lead to an extinction of this plant. Um, I know that I was involved with the people at Decriminalize Nature, which is an organization that helped pass the decrim measure in Berkeley
Mm.
or Oakland. Sorry, it's Oakland. That was one of the first ones. They're not the same place. I know this.
I'm from both
Um,
Berkeley and Oakland, just so you know.
wait, say it again.
Hey, I said I'm from both Berkeley and Oakland, so representing the East Bay. And
Oh,
yeah, I love
uh,
these.
yeah, I know the perspective of decrim nature is that by decriminalizing peyote, it makes it people are encouraged to grow it then because it's not illegal to grow it. So that's just another perspective. But there have been some members of I know some members. It is a ceremony, so I know that there has been a request that peyote be not included on some of the measures for decriminalization. That's just a little. This is how specific this little infighting can get. Because
Yeah,
when we were working in Maine, it was like the measure that was happening in Portland. Like we didn't like Decrim Nature didn't support it because they didn't include peyote, and Decrim Nature says you should include peyote, but like there's a lot of infighting in this whole thing. There's a lot of just saying. So there's a lot that goes into it.
yeah. So anyway, we took this transpersonal counseling course and we had this awesome teacher and she brought some great people in at different times over the course and um, they really spoke to both Brenna and I. I think we had some pretty big takeaways from what they shared. Um, do you want to start with what impacted you the most?
Well, I was gonna say that there was a speaker who spoke to our class, and their name I'm just really afraid to mispronounce it, but it's like Kathumi Castro. It's spelled Kuthoomi. So I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing their name wrong, but they also spoke at the protest at MAPS. So honestly, something that they said at MAPS was like, oh, in my heart. But I know that they were part of that experience, so I'll just share that. They were saying essentially, it took me forever to try to figure out who this person was who was speaking, because all that I saw were videos of our professor and some of her friends or colleagues or people she works with going up at the MAPS conference and kind of interrupting Rick and speaking about psychedelics. It was like a protest. And the second person who spoke was this individual. And I looked through all these videos. So I'm almost positive that's their name, but I'm not totally positive because it was really hard to find it. But they said, long introduction was essentially like, if we misuse these medicines, they will cause harm. They were like, look at tobacco. I'm just summarizing this individual's point of view, by the way. This is not a total representation, but tobacco was a sacred plant and now it's causing cancer. And they were saying cocaine was a sacred plant and now it's causing addiction. So same with opium. When we take these substances away from their sacred location, the plants are alive and fungi, they don't want to be taken advantage of, and they're going to start to create harm. So they were just saying essentially like warning people, like, you've been misled by this movement. And that just had a huge impact on me about taking how the misuse of medicines causes harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think about that a lot. It had a really big impact on me.
Yeah. The person who came in to speak on a panel, I don't remember at all who they were, but I'm pretty sure their stance was sort of pro ketamine, pro MDMA, in going through the MAPS process and being used with psychotherapy. And I forget what question I had, but I wrote down one of the things that they said that really stood out to me. And they said, is the legalization of psychedelics to help the colonizing white heal so they're able to make reparations. This was sort of touched on, I think, at some point in our episode before, but it's similar to how I wonder, what my education, how it's meant to be used. I think there's a similarity in this question, which is the more accessible, we'll say, ketamine and MDMA are to the white elite colonizers, is that going to help their dismantling of white supremacy in their own mind? Will that help them get to this collective place of unity, and that one person is not meant to rule over everyone else, that there is no supremacy? Is that the point? Is that what is meant from this new psychedelic revolution, or whatever people are calling it? And that sat with me so much, because as this panel was coming up, I was sort of questioning, who is my target population? And as much as I always want to be able to serve the people who are in the highest need of services and have the least accessibility to the services, part of me also wondered, maybe that isn't my population that I'm meant to serve. Maybe BIPOC folks who actually have their own lived experience and also have this amazing education and training, maybe they're the ones who are supposed to be serving their community. And maybe I'm supposed to be working with privileged white folks who are trying to decolonize themselves. And I'm like, I still sit with that, and maybe it'll become clear. But
It will become clear.
yeah, I don't
Maybe
want to.
I'm. That's what
I don't want to. That's my honest response is I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But I know I have a
sorry.
high tolerance to hear the shit that white privileged people say, and it's not going to hit me in my core in the same way that it might hit some marginalized or oppressed person who has been dealing with this shit their entire life. Maybe I
Yeah.
am supposed to hear it.
This
Maybe
is like, I had this, sorry.
no, go
I
ahead.
had this too about allyship where I was thinking about how important it is for someone who isn't going to be emotionally activated by the content to have a conversation, not to speak for someone, but because like it's such a waste of that individual's time. I was trying to think about how it would feel how it feels to talk to like men about male privilege. And if they don't get it, it feels like it's a slap in the face because I'm like, I, I'm done. I don't want to talk. It's too triggering for me to,
Mhm.
or like, yeah, I'm like, I would love other men to talk to each other about. Just work on that.
Right. There's
Yeah.
an element to the we.
Yeah.
There's an element to the we. So like recently I have been and reaching out to my community that I will say is mostly white privileged identity body people and offering an invitation to talk about Palestine and Palestinian liberation and what stance they're taking and whether they're being neutral or silent or whether they need to educate themselves more. I've been kind of offering myself as an invitation to like, hey, I would love to be having these conversations with you, um, and realizing that when I take a stance of we, people seem to be much more understanding and receptive to it. Okay, we
Mm.
are decolonizing our white supremacist ideologies. If you were indoctrinated with Zionism, then you must do the same thing. You must also dismantle the white supremacy that is leading your ideology. And I've had to dismantle my white supremacy. I'm still doing it, I will say. I am constantly decolonizing my thought process and my identity, but I don't know where I was going to take that. But
It did feel like you made a good point, though.
it's going back to like members of communities, like say we're talking about marginalized BIPOC community. Are they to be better served by people that represent their same identities? Because I'm not trying to be a white savior coming in to be like, I get
No.
it. I don't get it.
It's like we can't even answer this question, though. That's the deal.
Yeah, here we
It's
go.
not our responsibility to answer that. Like we don't know the answer because we can just ask the question.
Yeah.
And we'd have to I have to be content with my own ignorance. I'm here to help. I'm here to do what I can. And I can't write the story of what is right for anybody else. Period. And it's a pretty colonial mindset to think that I can, to think that I have anything to say about what's right for anybody else besides myself. And I think that
Hmm.
that's like the core of the experience. And it's also just it's in so much, especially in counseling. And I've just been having this huge thing about what is right for someone, what is wrong for someone. I'm here outside of this relationship that took me so long to get out of, and I'm so happy. And I'm looking at people in my life, and I'm like, I want to get them out of their toxic situations. It's not my fucking job. It isn't my job. And who am I to say that what they're going through is good or bad or right or wrong? Like, why do I live? Why do I get to say anything? I don't get to say anything. That is the place. It's my feeling like I have a right to say something about somebody else's life, or feeling like like I'm supposed to have something to say about someone's life or their trajectory or their path. That is the lie. That is the program in my head. And it's so hard to get out of it. Like, it just really is hard to get out of it. It's really hard. And it's especially hard when you're a counselor, when people are looking at you and they're like, what should I do? And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, it's hard. I mean, I have to be totally real. Like, it's really hard to be a counselor, to continuously remind myself that there's no objective right or wrong. And that is, I think that's why we, like, yeah, so it just goes loops back around to the mental health system. But
Yeah. Okay. There's
that's
one
my
thing I have to say. I think there's a caveat in this, and I hear what you're saying, but there are certain things that are right and wrong. And we do have a certain moral obligation as people with, hierarchy in the relationship, as counselors. There's a certain moral obligation we have to stand with our values. And part of what you said that I'm like trying to wrap my words around, you were like, there's nothing I can say. There is. There is. But you cannot say your desire, you cannot say your judgment, you cannot say your fear. What you can say is, I will always be here for you, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you can say. I'm here for you. And the other part is the contentment is tricky. We can't stay complacent. We have to always evaluate our level of complacency. So I need more time to wrap my head around this, but what I will say is there is a caveat to not speaking about what is right and wrong in counseling, because sometimes you do have to let your clients know where you stand on moral questions, like, do you back their safety? Do you back the laws that are being passed right now to protect them or to not? They need to know that. They need to know where you stand on certain things. So it's the same. I hear what you're saying with, like, people asking you for advice. You can't say what you think is right or what you think is wrong necessarily, but there is always a little caveat to that, which is like, no matter what it is that you decide, I will be here to support you and guide you. And especially with people that are in toxic relationships, that's the most important thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I trust you. I, you got this. That's what I told myself in the
Mhm.
past. I hear what you're saying. And I think the thing that I can agree with for sure is that, like, first of all, I appreciate the balance. And also, it seems as if you're also speaking to the humanized, like being a human when you're in counseling. I can
Mhm.
say I I think that the best thing to do when you're leaving a narcissist is to cut off contact completely.
Mhm.
However, my client doesn't have to make that choice. And I don't, I'm not attached to their choice, because maybe they know, I'm not the one who to say what's it. Maybe they need to have contact for a little while longer and then come to the conclusion themselves. Or maybe
Mhm.
they need another dynamic, or maybe they're still doing something. And so yeah, it's like we can still share what is our choices and what is true for us and be human beings. I think that that's what you're saying, is not to be afraid to be a person and to have to act like you're just blank neutral,
Yeah.
or that you don't care. I can care about something, and I think that that's what you're feeling, is like you're ready to, you just want to share who you are truly and the things that matter to you, and you're open to the whatever reaction an individual might have to that share. And there's some non-attachment to what they choose to do upon knowing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to clarify for people who are listening, part of what Brenna and I are speaking to is when you're trained as a counselor, there's an element of neutrality that you are trained to have, because you can't be judgmental of the actions that that client takes unless they're harming themselves or others or have intention to do so. So it's like you can't have the opinion that they should get out of their abusive, toxic relationship. You have to just be neutral to some of these things. That's kind of what our training has told us to do, is take yourself and your opinions and your story out of it and be a safe sounding board for them to process. But there's so many limitations to that, and I think there's actually at the core of remaining neutral to everything that inhibits a lot of helping and healing, especially when it comes to meeting your client in the human experience. Like, I love what you're saying about not attaching judgment one way or another. But I think when I feel I have done my best counseling is when I'm in a super deep emotional human experience and I meet with my clients and I am just there on the same plane as them. I have to meet their humanity in order for me to feel like I'm doing my best work. And that probably doesn't come across as neutral the whole time. I hope it comes across as non judgmental. But yeah, I think just. Mhm.
Mm-hmm. We're all, I mean, I guess all I'll say is we haven't mastered the art of helping.
Yeah.
And to say that you can totally take yourself out, I think is, in DBT, we say radical genuineness,
Mm.
which is just this whole part of being real and being in the relationship. And I think that that's, yeah, the end of that is like when we're talking about the I thou, like I'm still here. I still have my things.
Hmm.
And there's been like, there's some times where I just feel like it just comes over me. And I'm like, they're like, what should I do? I'm like, listen, you know,
Hmm.
because sometimes not, it's,
Do whatever you want,
we
but do it.
have, do whatever you want. I
I think you
definitely,
should do whatever it is you want.
sometimes people just need confirmation of what they're already saying. They're like, I don't know what I should do because I kind of want to do this and this and this, but maybe I do this. And I'm like,
Hmm.
do what you want to do. And I'm just going to say it to you clearly.
Yeah. So,
Deviated again from psychedelics. There's
I
not
mean,
much to say.
what more is there to say?
There really
Psychedelic.
is.
We
There
don't have
isn't
a
that much.
song. Yeah, we're not really.
I'm feeling very surprised by where I am now in relationship to how I used to feel not even that long ago about this work and these medicines. It
Mm.
feels like a 180. And it's just interesting. So this is why I've been feeling called to have a disclaimer for those who are anti psychedelics, because they're still in this realm of it's a drug and it's illegal and it will make your scramble your brain. Y'all need to watch some documentaries. There's so much out there about why that opinion isn't really capturing the reality of this work. For
Mm-hmm.
those of us who are in this transpersonal counseling realm, and so there's a lot of people in our program who are interested in psychedelics because the work doing that work with the medicines is a transpersonal practice. It's if it were to fall under a branch of psychology, it would fall under transpersonal, probably more than anything else. Definitely not cognitive behavioral, not so. A lot of people who are interested in transpersonal are also really interested in psychedelics. So for all of our peers, I think it's important to have a more nuanced conversation about what it looks like to be advocating for this work and the limitations, and also just encouraging folks to oh weird, I was getting a call. I just like to sorry, I'm getting distracted. I just have to center myself again. I got distracted by that call. What was I saying?
Peers, nuanced. I'm really curious to see what continues to unfold with psychedelics and with transpersonal counseling and psychology and see. I'm curious to see how that unfolds. The thing that came into my mind when you were explaining the no, this is a drug and this will, put holes in your brain. The question that is always imperative to ask is who is telling you that information and how is it serving them? And this is what we talked about before with the mental health industrial complex. And it's sort of the same thing with decolonizing yourself. Who is telling you that information and how is it serving them?
Yeah.
And how can you think critically and decide for yourself what is good for you?
Yeah. And I would say that same question, like there are plenty of people that I've met who are just doing ayahuasca ceremony after ayahuasca ceremony after ayahuasca ceremony. I would ask them that same question. Look at where you're at and the doctrine that you're in, and make sure you are conscientious of when it has reached its limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And when it is no longer empowering, it becomes disempowering. I've noticed this happen with psychedelic substances sometimes. It's like it's the way to access this. This is how I center. This is how I regulate. It's a little bit of a spiritual bypassy form of substance use.
It
Like
is.
substance misuse.
Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, the person who spoke was saying these medicines are alive and they have a life of their own, and if you misuse them, they will cause harm because they, at the end of the day, these plant medicines have the strongest boundaries. They're just protecting their own emotional capacity to give, and they're saying, if you abuse me, you will get hurt. And I know actually a lot of people who have died from substance abuse. And some of those substances have been plant medicine. So anything can be taken too far,
Yeah.
especially when you are just using a substance to access some enlightened state that makes you feel like you're doing work.
Ah, spicy,
You might not
spicy.
you might not be doing the work, baby. Boo, getting high.
but
Unfortunately.
and I would like to say, getting high is a totally awesome end point in our lives. Get high, trip out on mushrooms. There is nothing I like more than tripping and listening to Fleetwood Mac being a freaking stupid hippie and just chatting with my friends or being in nature. Can we leave it at that,
Mm.
please? I mean, not right now. I'm sober now, but
Yeah.
can't it just be about that? Can't
Yeah.
it just be about that? One time I did mushrooms and I felt like the sun rays were like little sun drops kissing my face.
That's so cute.
It was so cute.
One time I did a bunch of sass and I was at a venue where I lost the glasses that I was wearing. And I was like asking everyone around me, where are my glasses? Can you help me find my glasses? And everyone was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I closed my eyes and I was like, tapped into my intuitive power. And I was like, I know exactly where my glasses are. And I sent it all the way to the spot at the venue and I found my glasses and I was like, I know.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a good story. I love that story.
Good place to end, I think.
I think it's a good place to end.
Yeah. Should we do
Ooh,
one little what we're working on
sure. You go first so I can think about it.
in a minute or less? Oh, what am I working on? Right now I'm working on preparing myself for spending time with family over the holidays, preparing myself for new things that are to come in 2024, and really making sure that I'm carving out time for me to connect to spirit and my intuitive power so that I don't just get so wrapped up being busy, busy, busy that I'm not taking care of my own soul and heart and making sure that I have a lot of boundaries set with family.
I am working on honestly kind of working on receiving in this flow of abundance that includes money, which is really hard.
Yeah.
And I did the very cliche thing of putting my phone lock screen says I'm rich in all areas of my life.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so I'm doing that kind of stuff right now. And I'm saying yes to stuff and things are coming my way. So I'm trying to be open to giving and to receiving. That
Yay.
is and and when something comes my way, being like, "Ah, yes. This is mine. Thank you for giving. Thank you for returning it to me." Like this
Mm,
is it's it's all the stuff I'm putting out coming to me in different ways.
hmm.
It's hard.
And we trudge along the journey one step. Continue on.
One step at a time, and Avery and I will be united, or just to see each other very soon.
Brenna's moving to Los Angeles.
Don't tell anyone that. It's a secret. My
No, I'm
location
telling
is
everyone, so now you can't. Oh, we can edit it out.
no, it's okay.
We can edit it out.
I think it's just is what it is. I'm
You're
not
safe.
as scared. I feel fine.
Yeah, you're safe and protected. Nothing can harm you.
Nothing can get through. I am safe.
Yeah. Okay.
I love you,
End
buddy.
it. Love you too.
The vision of Always Be Collective is of an inclusive, innovative, and intuitive healing practice that uses wisdom from the mind, body, heart, and spirit. We strive to establish a community of mental health practitioners who share a common goal to expand beyond the limitations of the current mental health care system. We provide services aimed towards individual and collective healing. You can visit us at alwaysbecollective.com.